Hi everyone, this is Susan with the Rhinestone World. This video is a quick overview of the Send panel in Silhouette Studio. So I'm here in Silhouette Studio and this is Business Edition. A lot of what I cover applies to any version of the software. I'll try to point out if there's a special function that is unique to Designer Edition or Business Edition. So I'm going to move over to the Send panel and I'm going to just start in the top left corner and go through the basics. So this is a great overview for beginners. Up in the very top left along the menu, you'll notice that these choices are the same as they are in the design panel. So you can see up here in the right hand corner where I'm going through these 4 different pages or panels, and I'm in the design page now, and these are exactly the same as they are in the Send panel. So these options are things like saving, printing, the edit menu, or the classic, cut, copy, paste. So I'm not going to explain those because they're the same as the design page. The next group of options here in the Send panel is all of these icons. So you'll notice that most of these are highlighted, which means they're available. If they're grayed out, it just means that that's not an option for you right now. So for example, I haven't done an undo, so redo is not available. But the rest of these are available. And if you hover over them, they'll give you a little display of what each of them mean. So they are pretty common, very similar to other Windows programs. File open, save, print, undo, redo. This icon is to select all. Notice if I click on it, it's selected everything on my print area. The next one is to deselect all. Notice that this doesn't impact your cutting, so whether it's selected or not, you still see the red cut lines, and that's a good indication that you have something ready to cut, is when you see these red cut lines. The next few icons along here have to do with zooming in and zooming out. So this one is a zoom in, allows you to go closer. This is the zoom out. This one is a specific area to zoom into. So when I click on this one, and now let's say I just click on the R, it's going to take me right into the R. The way to get out of this view is this one over here, fit to window, which takes it back to the regular view. And in the middle were these other zoom options, which are very similar to the design page, which allow you to use your mouse to zoom in and out. So if I click on this one and then I hold down my left mouse button and move it up and down, it makes my display larger and smaller. And this one allows me to hold on to it with my left mouse button. When I click it, I can move it around. And again, I can go back to just the classic view when I use this little icon. This next icon is the Media Layout Setup panel, which is unique to Business Edition. So this is an option for users who have Business Edition, and it allows you to see both the design page and the Send page like at the same time. So that's just an option in Business Edition. So we've covered the things in the top left corner here, and notice that you've got like a split screen here, and often you would be able to change the size of these. However, in the Send page, that's not an option, so I don't have the ability to make this smaller and this larger. They stay just like they are. Up here, starting on the right side, we talked about each of these 4 options. We are in the highlighted one, which is the Send page or Send panel. And right below that, we have our choices for simple, line, fill, and layer. So this is referring to if it's the cut action that you're taking, and most of my work is cutting vinyl. So it's usually that I'm cutting, so that's my action. So do I want to cut just the way the design is? Do I want to cut by the line color, the fill color, or by layers? So layers is also something that's available in Designer Edition and higher. So I'm not going to get into that, except that to tell you it has to do with you can create different layers of your design that all fit together and are separate, and you can cut them separately. So the majority of your time in the Send panel is going to be spent just picking out which material you're cutting, maybe setting up a new material and adding your cut settings, and doing your test cuts, and then coming down here and hitting Send. So that's really the majority of what you do, but it is nice to know what some of these other things do as well. So when we talk about cutting by line color, notice if I click on this option, the only line color I have is red, and that's just a default in Silhouette Studio. So the majority of designs are going to have a red line color around everything. So unless you are in the habit of working in the design page and changing your line color either to match your design or just taking it off completely, you may not use that very often. But cutting by fill color is something that can be commonly used and can be very handy. So if you'll notice, I have a whole bunch of different colors that came up here, which is may seem strange because this is just all in black and white. And that's because I actually have a design over here in the design page that I have hidden over here on the side. So this is one of our designs that I've just moved over here, and just to use as an example, I'm going to put this in the design page area in my cutting area, and we're just going to talk about this. So I'm just picking up my design and moving it over. Now when I go to the Send panel, and this is one of the most common mistakes or problems that people have when they're first starting to use Silhouette Studio, is that if you've brought in an SVG file and you go to your Send panel, your cut lines don't always show up right away. So generally you just need to select your design and choose the cut action in order for those red lines to show up. So if we come over here and just click on our design and click on the cut action, you'll see all of our little cut lines show up. And in this case, this is a rhinestone design, so there are tons of little circles. Those are all of our cut lines. So this is where we could proceed and choose our material and go ahead and cut this. I will add one little tip that I've noticed, and this could just be something going on currently, which is that selecting your material sometimes is difficult to click on it. It seems just a little bit, I don't know, just a little strange. I found that once I click once on this drop down for materials and then use my scroll wheel on my mouse, that seems to work a little better. And then I can choose, for example, for this, I would choose our magic flock material. So this is our TRW magic flock that I would be using to make a rhinestone template. So I can choose that design by just picking it from the drop down. And the reason it's in my drop down is because I added it as a new material. So this is something that you need to know how to do when you are especially first starting out, and that is to add a new material type. So even though your software comes with all of these pre-programmed cut settings, a lot of times those aren't going to be the perfect cut settings for your material. And the best thing to do to start out with is to get those cut settings. For example, from the rhinestoneworld.com, we have all of our cut settings there for you, and you can load those in so they're specific to, for example, Caesar Easyweed or the other materials that we carry. But this is where you can add a new material. So I'm just clicking on Add New Material, and this is going to allow me to come in here and add the name of it. And let's say that I want to create a new material that's called, I'm just going to click in this space and call it FDC wall vinyl. and it's actually the same cut settings as FDC decal vinyl, but let's just say that I want to add that. Now I can come down here and add in my cut settings to whatever I want them to be, and I can press save and save that. Now notice I also have other options here as I'm setting up this material. So I can choose to make this a double pass, which we do suggest for Magic Flock actually, but that just tells your blade to go around twice. It's a double pass. And there are some other options here also. Line segment overcut is going to tell your blade to go past the point. Instead of coming to a perfect corner and turning, it's going to go over a little. So that's going to be good for small intricate designs. And you can even choose how big of an overcut you want. So down here at the start of the cut, you can say you want it goes up to 1 millimeter beyond the design end. And same thing, so you can do it at the start and the end. You could make them both higher. So every time there's a straight line, your blade will go a little over to make sure that it gets a good cut. It's not going to impact curves at all. It's only for those straight lines. So if I wanted to, I could save this material, and it's available for me now from my drop-down box anytime I want to use it. The interesting thing is, as soon as you add a new material, it doesn't necessarily bring that up for you right away as the material that you're cutting with. So just be sure to look back up here and make sure you have the right material selected for what you're cutting. So you can see the options here when I've loaded this in. Cut is the only option, but if you're working with other types of materials like cardstock and you want to use other functions on your Cameo, you'll have other choices here for other types of materials. It's also important that you make sure that if you're using a Cameo 3, that you have the auto blade selected and not the ratchet blade. Coming down here, you also have the option for cut edge instead of just cut. This is something that is used often for like print and cut. It's probably not something you would use very often if you're just using vinyl for creating products. And there's one other thing that I want to show you. One is related, and this is related to Welding script fonts. So I'm just going to move this cute little design over into the margin, and I want to just point out there's something that we always talk about when you're using script fonts, and that is that your cut lines, I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see this, your cut lines are overlapping when you use script fonts. So if I were to go here to the send panel and see my cut lines, if I were to actually send this to my Cameo, I would have all of these overlapping cut lines, and that would completely mess up my material. So we often talk about needing to weld your script fonts. The only downside of that is if I were doing several jobs that, say it was a design and I was going to put maybe different people's names on each one. So say it's one design and I'm going to put someone's name under it and it's a script font. As soon as I weld that, now it's no longer a text box that I can change the letters in because I've created it into a welded shape. But there's an option here in the send panel, and it's when we go to the let me take this back to the regular size. It's when we go to the fill, so cut by fill, right here in this column just to the left of the color block. This is an auto weld function, and if I click on this, notice now, even though this looks like really strange cut lines, it does come out looking great. So even though it's got these, the view is a little bit strange, it's actually going to cut it just as if you had welded your script font. So that's a nice little feature to know that that's available. And the last thing I just want to talk about briefly is the importance of your test cuts. So you've got the option here to do a test cut, and I would strongly suggest that you use it not just as a beginner, but even as you go along, even if it's a material that you've been working with frequently, because you can have differences in materials, you can have differences in your blade, depending on how old your blade is. So test cuts are really important. This is really handy here to use these little arrows. It allows you to move the location of your test cut around on your material. So if I were cutting a design and it's set to cut right up here at the top corner, maybe I don't want to do my test cut in this corner because it would come really close to my design. So I can use these little arrows here or right on my cameo to move my test cut over. And maybe I want to move it right over here where I've got a little more space available. So that is very handy. The last couple of things down here at the very bottom, if you have business edition, you can actually come in here and rename your cameo because you might be cutting with several different ones and you can keep them straight. Also, you have a little bit of help available down here at this little graduation cap icon that gives you a little walkthrough for getting ready to set up for your first cuts. And down here you also have a few other options. So this one is for print and cut. This is the icon to set up your cameo on Bluetooth. These are some advanced options. And I'm not going to go into these. They are things that have to do with just user preferences. So where you want your material to feed, layer sorting. Again, layers is something that's available in designer edition and business edition, and cut order sorting. Those are all just advanced features, not something that you're going to use very often. All right, so this has been just a brief little overview of the Send panel, and I hope this was helpful. I have a special treat for you for watching all the way to the end. If you like this Halloween boo design that I used during this video, you can click here to get 80% off of this design right now. So this is a rhinestone design that's available on our website at therhinestoneworld.com. You can just add this coupon code at checkout to get 80% off. Thanks for watching.